We'll have several reports to put this historic day into perspective for you, including a live interview from Wall Street.
And another major story today, the crisis in the Persian Gulf. U.S. destroyers have attacked. Iran says we are now in a full-fledged war. We'll have a live report on that. But first, the Wall Street story.
The sounding of the bells late this afternoon signaled the end to a frightening day on Wall Street. How frightening? Well, consider this. Stock prices dropped an unbelievable amount, anywhere from 508 to 528 points, obliterating the previous record by more than 400 points. There was also more selling than ever before. The volume today, 626 million shares, another all-time record. The panic was all over Wall Street. Because there was so much trading, the final numbers are still being tallied. The numbers that we gave you are the latest available, gathered just moments ago.
As you might imagine, brokers here and across the country have been swamped with calls from worried clients. Alice Edwards has spent the entire day at one Cleveland brokerage firm. She joins us now live. Alice, it must have been incredibly frantic there just about all day long.
Lou, will you be surprised? Although it was a blue Monday for many of these brokers. I've been at two Cleveland brokerages today. I'm at Oldie Discount Now, and earlier today I was at E.F. Hutton. And you'd be surprised. You'd expect these brokers to be frantically screaming, yelling, throwing buy and sell orders, but that really hasn't been the case. You see, all the trading is done in New York, and it's crazy there all day today. It was. But here, these account executives open accounts. They have buy and sell orders. They look up on their computers and they type in the stock and see how it's doing. So what they are doing is just calling their clients today and doing a lot of hand-holding, telling them how the stock is doing and seeing whether they would like to buy and sell today. So that's really what they've been doing. They were a little stunned. Many of these brokers haven't seen the market plummet so low before, but how low is low? Well, that's a question that they're facing right now.
All right, Alice Edwards, thank you very much. The single most frantic day of trading in the history of Wall Street, an incredible day, a day all of us should be very, very concerned about. We have invited financial expert Michael Bond to join us again today to help us sort out what is happening on Wall Street. He is a professor of finance at Cleveland State University. Professor Bond, you were with us after 2 days of big losses on Wall Street last week. Those days really pale compared to today. How great is the concern right now?
Well, Lou, this is the worst dollar and worst percentage loss in the history of the New York Stock Exchange. It pales by comparison what happened on October 29th, 1929. Now, the volume is a little different story. That's about 60% adjusted for what happened in 1929. I think what you have here is for the most part, an irrational movement on the part of the stock market. The fundamentals in the U.S. economy, while we do have some serious problems, do not warrant this kind of drop.
What can be done, if anything, to stem the tide?
Well, I think what's going to happen here is you may see a few more days or a few more weeks or even a few more months of continuous movements downward. Sooner or later, the cooler heads will prevail on Wall Street, and the fundamental value of those shares will be recognized. And I think it's important that people understand that this is not 1929. We do not have the imbalances. We do not have the situations now that could put us back into that type of a catastrophe that we wound up in the 1930s.
The selling of blue chip stocks like IBM, how worrisome is that, if at all?
Well, again, I think what happened after last week is a lot of investors went home, particularly with the last hour on Friday, and they said, we've got to get out of this. We're not sure what's going on here. And I think a thing, again, to point out to people who are very concerned about this is that people are not running in, selling stocks, taking their money out of banks. There was a flight to quality today. So until people figure out what's going on in the stock market, what they did today was they dumped a lot of stocks and they bought short-term treasury bills, which are the safest investment you can have in the United States, and the more irrational ones went to gold, which I'm convinced will not turn out to be a good investment for them.
And finally, how much of this is tied to events in the Persian Gulf?
Well, that's got to have something to do with it when you have a collection of irrational individuals saying they're in a fighting war with you. That's going to cause uncertainty, and the stock market hates uncertainty, so that may have contributed to it. But I truly believe that this was, for the most part, an irrational lurch on the market's part. I would urge investors not to get panic-stricken. If they're out on a ledge somewhere, they ought to come in right now and go have supper.
All right, a dose of optimism from Professor Michael Bond from Cleveland State. Thank you again. In addition today, violence in the Persian Gulf is sending tremors around the world. American warships today attacked and destroyed 2 Iranian oil platforms in the Persian Gulf, an attack that the U.S. calls self-defense and Iran calls an act of war.
The American attack will have tremendous repercussions, not only in the Gulf, but also, perhaps, on Capitol Hill. Rebecca Shaw has been in touch with correspondents in the Middle East, and she joins us now with some details. Rebecca.
Wilma, I talked to a reporter with the Associated Press in Nicosia, Cyprus. It's from there that Tehran radio is monitored in the Middle East. I'm told that Tehran radio has been very active and very angry this afternoon. The official Islamic news agency, which comes out of Iran, is saying on the air that the U.S. is now involved in a full-fledged war, that Iran will deliver a, quote, crushing blow to counteract the American attack this morning. The U.S. maintains the attack was justified. Here, specifically, is what happened. Last week on Friday, Iranian Silkworm missiles attacked the U.S.-flagged tanker, the Sea Isle City. Over the weekend, the president announced that he had made a decision on how the U.S. was going to respond to the attack. He summoned congressional leaders to the White House and told them of his plans. This morning, 4 American warships attacked and destroyed these Iranian oil platforms. The platforms, 75 miles south of the Iranian coastline, were, according to the U.S. government, often used as launching points when Iran attacked Gulf shipping traffic. Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger calls the attack a measured response.
We consider this matter is now closed. We do not seek any further confrontation with Iran, but we will be fully prepared to meet any escalation of military actions by Iran with stronger countermeasures.
Weinberger stressed that the U.S. gave Iranian personnel 20 minutes warning before striking so that they could evacuate. And although Iran has reports of several injuries, Tehran radio has not made mention of any casualties. However, radio monitors in the Gulf region report hearing an Iranian voice saying, U.S. warship, let me evacuate the injured before you shoot again. Now, just about an hour ago, U.S. forces boarded an Iranian platform near where the 2 others were destroyed. What they found, radar, communications gear, had been torched before the Iranians left that 3rd platform. Tehran's War Information Headquarters is, in their words, will endanger American interests in retaliation for the attack today. The threats are not unexpected and not uncommon coming from Iran. Similar threats have been waged in the past. The real fighting might now happen on Capitol Hill. There has been increasing pressure on the president to invoke the War Powers Act, a piece of legislation that gives Congress more of a say in what we do with our defenses. The pressure is likely to increase even further now after today's attack.
All right, Rebecca, and in fact, coming up later during this Live on 5 broadcast, we're going to talk to Congressman Ed Feehan about the attack in the Persian Gulf and get some congressional reaction firsthand. 62% of us favor increasing the U.S. Navy presence in the Gulf. In general, men and people with higher incomes tend to support a U.S. buildup in the Gulf. Women and the poor tend to oppose it. Our sister station, WCPO, sponsors the poll along with the Cincinnati Post and the University of Cincinnati. Now, we must add that the poll was conducted before Iran attacked a tanker flying the American flag and today's U.S. attack on 2 Iranian oil platforms. Now, should we stay in the Gulf? If so, under what terms? Congressman Ed Feehan will tell us what he thinks a little later in this newscast.
Loss more than doubled the famous stock market crash of 1929. Wall Street was in a total panic all day. One broker saying it's almost like the end of the world.
Dick Ross joins us in the studio now. Dick has been talking to financial experts all day to find out what, if anything, we can do. Dick?
Well, many of the experts agree that if you did not get the chance to sell your stock holdings today, why sell them tomorrow? Because you have already lost, on the average, 22.5% of their value in one day. Officially, and the figures were only confirmed within the hour, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 508 points at 1738.74. That is the level the stock market was at 1.5 years ago. Declining stocks outnumbered gainers 50-1. The volume an incredible record 604 million shares. So what do you do if you have an IRA, a mutual fund, or $1,000 or $10,000 in stock? Don't panic.
Down 8.5 at 23. I've seen it go
Such staggering loss figures had never before been heard on Wall Street. Local brokers advising clients they had lost hundreds or thousands of dollars in one day, on paper at least. Why?
There's panic out there. There's a lot of panic.
But why panic? For some reason, everyone all at once decided to take every penny of profit they had made in the last 5 years of the rising stock market. So now, what do you do?
Right now, the small investor, if he has any money, might want to consider adding to his shares, perhaps on a dollar cost averaging basis, but I think now is an excellent time to be adding to the shares.
Not only are those share prices at their cheapest in more than a year in the United States, but in other countries too. The stock markets in London, Tokyo, and Toronto all suffered their biggest losses in history today. Millions of people all around the world losing billions and billions of dollars. As for your IRA, if it's in stock,